I recently did a video where I compared the AX8 delay block to the infamous Strymon Timeline, one of the most desirable delay pedals out on the market at the moment. And based on that and some of the things that I did there, I figured it might be nice to go and have a look at the delay block in the AX8 and some of the advanced parameters that we can use to turn a basic delay sound into a really musical and inspiring delay. So the first thing to do, I have got the USA Clean amp happening with a what is this, factory 108, so the Petrucci V30 mix, which sounds like this on its own. And I'm playing my Strat with Sir ML pickups in it. So first thing to do, connect a delay block in series and then do this, hit edit and then reset block. And this is going to restore the default settings in the delay block. As you can see, it's bringing up the digital mono delay. I want to do everything in stereo today. If you're not running in stereo, just simply apply all of these tricks to a mono delay. But you know, stereo sounds really nice at the moment, and I'm wearing headphones, so I'm getting the full effect of all the panning that's going to happen. So first thing we're going to do, let's just go through the delay block and quickly talk about each of the parameters, and I'm going to get this set as simply as possible so that we can build from the ground up. You can see here we have got the delay time, which is just going to affect how much time elapses before you hear the delayed signal, and then the tempo setting. So if you set the tempo to none, you're allowed then to set the time just wherever you like. You turn this knob and it will give it to you in milliseconds. If you don't want to do that and you want to have rhythmic delays synced to the tap tempo, you can go through and choose one of these subdivisions. What I'm going to do for this video is I will set this to quarter note delay, and then if I tap a slow setting, like it's going to give me delay like this. But if I tap it fast, so that's pretty cool. It's not displaying the delay time at the moment, but I could also tap this up here and it's going to do that for us. So that's pretty cool. You can see that the actual delay time in milliseconds changes, but you can't go in and adjust it. So if you want to adjust it in milliseconds, put the tempo set onto none. Then over here in the stereo digital delay block, we have got two feedback settings. And this is really nice because this ratio control over here is going to control the ratio between the left and the right delay lines. And then based on what that ratio is setting in, if I just enter in feedback left, it's going to adjust feedback right at the same time. Say I set that to 50%. You can see that they both go to 50%. Whereas if I have the ratio, say, to 75%, it will automatically adjust it so that each channel gets the same amount of delay. This is what I mean. If I set it to 100%, we get this. And then if I set it to 75%, you'll notice that the two delay times are now, well, one of them only lasts 75% as long as the other one, but they both take the same amount of time to fade out. And that is such a cool trick for creating a dual delay. For now, we'll set the ratio to 100 and the feedback to 0. We can come back. This is going to give us a single repeat. We've got master feedback. We'll leave that at 100%. The spread, which is going to control basically how far left and right the respective delays are. This repeat hold we will come back to because that's a really cool little trick. And then over here, input gain, leave that at 100%. Level and balance we can leave where they are, and then mix I'm going to set to 50% so that the single delayed delay is going to come back at the same volume as my guitar. At the moment it sounds like this. Alrighty, so as you can hear, it is just a one-to-one representation of what goes in the advanced section. I've got everything leveled out here, so that's not affecting the tone in any way. Same with the modulation section. The depth is set to 0 on mod 1 and mod 2, so they're not doing anything. The EQ is flat, and the configuration is set to stereo. So we don't really need to look at this configuration setting, but let's go to these advanced parameters now and just see what they do to a basic delay. So the drive control, as I said in the Strymon video, emulates the grit parameter. Let's just have a listen to it all the way up on 10. It's just going to add distortion to the repeats. which makes it sound kind of gritty and lo-fi and cool. Another application of this is that if you are using a dirty, distorted guitar amp and you want the delay in front of the amp, what ends up happening there with a traditional delay pedal is that because the level of the delay decreases, you're decreasing the input gain to the amp. So you'll actually have a distorted guitar and then a clean delay signal. You can compensate for that by using the drive, but I like to use it to emulate this kind of grit control on the Strymon timeline. Around 3, I think sounds pretty cool. Let's have a listen to that. And once we go through and do a little bit of EQ, that will sound a little less harsh. The bit reduction emulates, an old school digital delay that might have only had like a 12-bit chip in it or something. So if we turn the bit reduction up, you'll basically hear the delay sound crappier and more lo-fi. Which at the moment sounds really harsh and again a bit crummy, but that is cool for all you kind of post-rock and lo-fi junkies. Let's set that to 0. I'm not a huge fan of that one. The ducker section is going to, basically a really quick explanation of this. This is like the dynamic delay in the TC2290. Well, that was one of the first units to have this, where what it's going to do is basically automatically turn down the delay while you're playing. So what it takes is it looks at the input signal into the delay block, which we adjust using the threshold. And once we cross that threshold, it will attenuate the delayed signal by this control, the amount we set here, the ducker attenuation. For example, let's set the threshold quite high and have a listen to what it does with the attenuation. Let's set it at 6 dB to start with. So it's not really doing much if we turn it down here. You can hear that when I'm playing with the threshold set really low and the attenuation set quite high, that basically the delay disappears while I'm playing. So this is great if you want to play a guitar solo or you want to play rhythm guitar without having to turn the delay on or off. It will automatically turn it up in the spaces to fill up the space. So unless I'm playing a guitar solo, I normally like the attenuation off, and I'll normally set it to between 6 or 9 dB when I'm playing a solo with the threshold set maybe at around like 40 dB or something like that. But I mean, let's have a listen to that. If I set it to 9 dB, it sounds like this. So there, I need to turn the threshold down. Let's have a listen to this. And you can hear there at the end of the phrase that it sort of comes back with a vengeance. For now, we will turn that off. All right. Some delays, for example, the TC2290 has this. If you select the 2290 block, it does the same thing. So have a listen to this. Is the best way to demonstrate this. And the reason I'm doing this is so we can listen. I'll go from no phase reverse to left, right, and then both. So playing around with that gives you sort of more of a spatial effect with the phase reverse on left or right. Okay, I'm just going to set it to none. I like the way that sounds. Let's have a look at what diffusion does. Basically, the best way to describe this is it smears out the delay, so it gives you like a less defined repeat. If I set the diffusion on 0, obviously we're just going to get this. And then if I set it to 100, you get this. I always think this is like if you're standing in front of a brick wall and you clap, you're going to hear something like the diffusion around 0. It basically comes back exactly as it is. Or if you're in like a huge, acoustic space with a lot of dampening, you're probably going to hear something like the diffusion turned up. So that's, I guess a space with a lot of different angles. With a lot of acoustic treatment, you'd hear dampening, not diffusion. So imagine there's no dampening in there, but there's lots of different angles and things, you would hear diffusion. So that's quite a nice one to play around with. It gives you sort of like an ambient texture. I'll leave that off again for now because we're going to talk about modulation. This is the big section which can really sweeten your delays up. Most modulation effects are actually based around delay lines. So what's happening here is we're taking a delay line and then we are modulating the signal with an LFO. So something like a chorus, for example, is just a really short delay that's modulated. If we went into the delay setting here, and we set to like 1/64th triplet, so 20 millisecond delay, you can really hear this effect here as I turn the LFO depth up. And you can hear that the depth range is going to affect how this control works. So with the depth range on low, you've got a finer control of the depth of your modulation. And obviously we've got the LFO rate control here. You can also sync this LFO rate to the tempo. I'm just going to leave it at 0.5 hertz. I think that sounds pretty cool. And with the depth around 50%, I love the way that sounds. That's a beautiful chorus sound. And then you can hear when I turn the delay time up, rather than get a true chorus, I'm getting my dry signal, and then the repeats are going to sound chorused, or they're going to be modulated. A cool thing to play around with here, if you want to emulate the Strymon timeline kind of thing, is to set the LFO phase to 0. Let's have a listen to what that does. So the modulation is going to be in phase with the signal. Personally, I like it at 90. The last thing we can do is change the type of LFO, or essentially its shape. In this case, it's a nice smooth sine curve. We can go through a bunch of other curves here. For example, let's start at the top and just move down and have a listen to what they sound like. Triangle is my favorite. These really come alive with some feedback. So I'll set the feedback to 30%. No particular reason why I've set it to 30%. And I'm also going to set the ratio to 95%, just so those two delays are a little offset, and it sounds really cool. that sounds really, really nice. You can hear that if I combine that with some diffusion, I'm going to get a beautiful, lush sound. And we also have two modulation controls. So one thing I like to do is to combine, say, a triangle with a log form and have a really low depth with a high rate, and then a higher depth with a lower rate. I think I got that the right way around. Let's have a listen to those two now. And you can hear there with that diffusion in there as well, and the two different modulations. It's almost like we've got chorus and delay and reverb happening. Now, you've probably been listening to this whole demo and go, man, that like drive control that he's got on is making it sound really harsh. What we'll do is we'll get into the EQ section. What I like to do is to use lots of high cut, say like 5K. It sounds like this now. Another trick is to set the filter slope a bit sharper. Say, well, you can go to 36 dB. Sounds like and you can hear with that high cut in there, it's taking out that top end harshness from the signal. It's helping the delays kind of sit better mixed in with the original guitar. And now that drive control, we can turn up a little bit more. It's not going to sound so harsh. You get more of that Strymon style grit control. And now that is really, really sounding sweet. You can get in there and EQ out some of the low end. I'm normally fine with the low end in there. Let's set it to 80 anyway, just because. Have a listen to this. And now we have delays that not only sit in the mix, but they have a real musical character to them. There's some modulation, there's a bit of grit. Not only do they sound really lush, but they don't sound like an effect anymore. They just sound like space. Hopefully that covers how you can dive deep into a particular delay setting. This is where I would normally be really happy with it, and I just sort of get on and start jamming out and trying to write some new tunes and basically play around with really nice chord voicings, because this to me is so inspiring to hear delays like this with a clean guitar. reminds me of all my favorite music from the 70s and 80s, and also, you know, heaps of modern music. This is really applicable whether you're playing pop or rock or progressive stuff, or even if you're just a guy who plays on Sunday at church and you're playing worship stuff. These kind of sounds are your bread and butter as a guitar player, and the AX8 does them so well. So basically, all the basic controls are really cool, but then definitely dive into stuff like diffusion and drive, and if you're playing guitar solos, the ducker, as well as trying to play around with the different LFO types and the phase and the depth and the rate. Normally, you know, low rate, high depth, and vice versa. Being able to have two different types of modulation applied is so handy. And then hike up those delays and they will sound far less harsh and they will sound far more pretty and usable. Anyway, that's just with the digital stereo block. Of course, we've got stuff like, there's so many blocks in there. If you're in the stereo bucket brigade or stereo BBD, this is one of my favorite ones. You can see that the stock settings already come with a low cut and high cut dialed in, as well as some modulation in there. And what I like to do with this one anyway is get the drive around 5, because it's my favorite delay sound in the box. Use a triangle waveform and turn the depth up a little bit, say like 50%, kind of where we had it before, and the depth up a little bit here. You can see this is preset to a sine block. Have a listen to this. And you can hear there, it acts almost like a reverb, but it's better than a reverb in my opinion, because it sort of doesn't get too washy and cluttered. My other favorite one is just the old mono tape delay, because you have this control here for the second head, which basically kind of works like the stereo thing, but obviously it's working in mono. So there's one head, and then I can choose where to pan the second delay. I think this is really cool. You can pan it just hard right and have one right down the middle. So I'll crank that up. And you can also see that the drive control is right in front of you, so you don't have to go sort of menu diving with this particular delay. So I think, and of course the Deluxe Mind Guy based on the Memory Man. I love this one too. This one sounds really good in front of the amp. Which I realized I didn't cover at all. So if you're a guy who likes to run the delays in front of the amp block, the Memory Man is the ticket for that sort of true analog sound. Anyway, I've rambled on long enough. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting subscribe. Check out my AX8 Basic series and all my other demo videos. And if you dig it, please contribute to the discussion, leave a comment, and let me know your favorite delay settings on your AX8. And if there's any pedals you want to try and emulate, maybe we can chat about it and trade some blocks and things like that. All right, I'll see you guys around. Cheers.